welcome back to BPMLive 2020. This is your third session of day 3 today, and we've got a presentation on combining BPM, RPA, and AI to achieve intelligent process automation. We've got Gopal and Andrew here from EPSoft. So over to you both.
All right, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Gopal Parvataneni. I'm the Chairman and CEO of EPSoft Technologies. We are based out of Dallas, Texas, and today I'll be co-presenting with our Chief Technology Officer, Andrew Leichter. Let me get started. So, and the goal for this session is really to get you thinking around how BPM, RPA, and AI should be combined and working together to achieve intelligent process automation, and how to better identify, assess, and prioritize your investments in these projects. Just so that we're all on the same page, RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation, and BPM stands for Business Process Management. And we will refer it as BPM and RPA for the duration of this webinar. So we hope to inspire you with some ideas that perhaps you haven't really thought about, and offer some tools that you can use to add a little bit of rigor to help you get more out of your investments. I will make sure we leave some time for Q&A at the end of today's discussion. So with that, let's get going. But before we dive into the discussion, let's answer a quick poll question. Are your current process tools, like BPM, process mining, and RPA, integrated to provide you with a comprehensive view and enable end-to-end automation? Wow, that's an interesting insight. And that's really what we are seeing in general, but thank you for taking time. So often, the topic of process is really focused only in terms of operational excellence. But there is a really whole other side to the process, which focuses on enabling new initiatives, which in turn enables new revenue through new capabilities for any business. For any business leader, it is important to focus on enterprise-wide business process automation holistically, instead of just thinking about those processes as individual tasks to automate. So automation is really playing a big role at enterprises, and likely will continue to in the post-pandemic world as well. And at the intersection of this RPA and AI lies another discipline of automation that is proving to be a key player for modern business, which is really called intelligent automation. So as we begin to understand how process automation technologies work, remember that intelligent automation is really greater than the sum of its parts. It's not about improving individual business functions. It's about using the technology in a way that actually transforms the entire business with the objective to drive value and better business outcomes. So I want to really talk about the 5 common challenges that we face, that we see most leaders are facing in this automation journey. So I want to talk about top 5. Of course, there are many other. So while business process automation continues to be a pillar for this digital transformation and a key driver for success, there are still challenges that accompany the undertaking. So the first and foremost, I want to talk about the siloed perspective and misplaced focus. Identifying key problems needs to come from business leaders and work done. And please don't just solve problems in silos. Leverage cross-functional work groups. So it pays to bring in experts from various disciplines to collaborate on an automation effort. It's even better if the work groups are already in place before the need for automation arises. The second one I want to touch upon is the insufficient process documentation. Most of the businesses that I spoke to in the recent past, they start having a piece of document that actually outlines the business process, but it quickly gets stale, and they don't really have a process to, in some cases they do, but in most cases they don't go back and update the process. And relying on employees to outline a business process can be problematic. It creates confusion, poor documentation, and in some cases inaccurate workflows. And without the right pieces in place, automation can only help so much. The third one I want to touch upon is lack of agility and preparation for change. So if 2020 has taught us nothing else, it's that unpredictable change, is a constant possibility. So there are dozens of reasons a process can change. It could be, a new compliance requirement. It could be underlying technology changes, or it could be, where corporates events like mergers and acquisitions can, disrupt the workflows. So for that reason, we always know that the processes are going to change. So we need to make sure we are agile. And then as the hybrid workforce take over, making sure synchronizing the hybrid workforce is not a problem is absolutely important. But I see that as a big problem because most platforms, they only do automation as long as it is done by the bot. But if you want to go to an extra leg and have the digital workforce and humans to work in tandem, that's very important. You have to have the human team, must know how to leverage bots to their maximum value. Not only that, but with proper implementation, they will be empowered to improve their own quality of work. And the last one I want to touch upon is the obscure and ill-defined ROI. You really have to make sure you measure the ROI. And if you don't know what you're going to get out of that, it's going to be a challenge. So not having a good insight about your ROI and this investment can be a big, a challenging aspect. While we all wait for that, while we all look for the silver bullet, there are no real silver bullets in digital transformation. For business leaders and executives responsible for making improvements to their organizations, the buzz around trending tech can be really distracting and overwhelming. But no individual piece of software is really, that silver bullet. But by combining some of these things, you can get to that point. So process automation is no different. Intelligent automation technologies work best when they're leveraged as drivers of an overarching digital transformation plan that is focused primarily on business outcomes and not really just the functional improvements. For example, RPA has been labeled as the fastest growing software subsegment. While there are many proven benefits, it still has its own strong limitations when it is used on its own. So some of them are like, in order to identify and implement an RPA process, extensive process knowledge is required. If no such knowledge is available, the benefits of RPA are far less significant, as much time and effort has to be put into gaining that knowledge. And also, in some cases, RPA is often considered a risk due to the fact that it is hard to test. And once deployed, the robots can actually execute a potentially faulty process at a very high rate with high consistency. So the other problem that I usually talk about is RPA orchestration is usually limited to orchestrating the bots, but does not allow to orchestrate large-scale or end-to-end processes in the scope of a whole organization. So RPA platforms in general lack, agility or ability to execute activities that are not automated with robots. So human elements cannot be completely removed from all process of an organization. But RPA does not provide concepts to execute tasks that have to be done manually. Likewise, executing larger software and coordinating services outside the scope of operating a user interface. Moreover, resource management is crucial for larger companies to maximize the efficiency of the employees and use their full potential. All these challenges can be very significant in their own ways, but knowing how they may affect your plans as you begin to integrate process automation will help you build a smarter and a more cohesive approach. Now, with all these problems and statements around the challenges, I also want to talk about the factors that for success. So let me talk about that. So what we want to suggest or recommend you is focus on business outcomes. Instead of focusing on shiny objects or fancy technology, focus more on business outcomes. That's the key for success. A clear and steady focus on business outcomes lays the foundation for proper execution. Increased efficiency, improved productivity, measurable quality improvements, boosted satisfaction. These are all factors that should be associated with well-defined goals. Maintaining a sharp focus on the outlined business outcomes keeps everyone's efforts aligned, from CEO to management to even individual employees, and even to the bots, actually. And the second one I want to bring up or highlight is, make automation part of a larger process redesign. Again, it's not about improving individual business functions. Intelligent process automation should never focus on a single improved output. Rather, it's about improving the entire portfolio of business functions. So the plan around automation is just one component in a broader, wider reaching plan. And the third one I want to highlight is create a culture that appreciates automation. Your team may feel suspicious that automation is being used to replace them. And that's a fact. I mean, there are so many people that actually spoke about that to me personally as well. They may not trust an algorithm or machine's ability to replicate their quality of work. So encourage your employees to think about automation as a tool to help make their jobs easier. Show them how much time it actually can save them. Encourage the synchronization of the hybrid workforce. Create an environment where people do their best work because they're supported by a digital workforce doing its best work as well. Nobody likes to do the legwork, but we can elevate their human potential by letting the digital workforce take over the legwork while the humans can do the things that are really important for the business. The next one I want to highlight is develop a centralized plan and build a COE, actually. While quick automation wins are great, long-term success on a broad scale is even better. That requires developing a centralized business plan for IT automation, including the deployment of RPA. Ultimately, this centralized plan should be executed and managed by a center of excellence, a dedicated team of experts who can oversee the efforts. This team really understands the intricacies of automation and integration, capturing feedback, establishing requirements, building best practices, creating a governance structure, and more. I mean, these are all important. Ultimately, the role of the COE is to ensure a smooth execution that is constantly on track to achieve business outcomes. Measure ROI with a consistent approach. That's the fifth one I want to highlight, because not knowing ROI on a constant basis is going to be a challenge. Integrating new technology involves considerable research, effort, and investment. To justify this outlay, the next step is building a solid business case that demonstrates value and ROI. So understanding ROI for automation is a matter of first acknowledging complexities and then taking a nuanced approach that will identify both immediate and long-term improvements as well as new opportunities facilitated by automation. With that, I will actually pass on to my colleague, Andrew Leichter, our CTO at EPSoft Technologies, to talk about the importance of one integrated platform that includes process intelligence, BPM, RPA, and even service orchestration to achieve more out of your investments on automation projects. Andrew, do you mind taking over?
Absolutely. Thank you, Gopal. Again, I'm Andrew Leichter, so I'm the CTO here at EPSoft. And I'm going to reiterate some of the points that Gopal has talked about. So really, if you look at this from the enterprise-wide strategy perspective, and then as well looking at these 5 factors that Gopal's set up for success, those concepts that he talks about, those really come out of experiences that we've had working with clients. And so I'm going to just break this down into a little bit more tactics and a little bit more structure around how this can really manifest itself. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off with a question. So do you feel confident in how your team measures ROI for your process automation initiatives? So take a couple seconds, fill this out, and then let's see what the results are as a group. Okay, let's see what the results are. All right, so we can see the vast majority of the responses really is that no, really the ROI is really poorly defined. And then really it's also short-sighted, undervalued based on the formulas we're using. So only 25% say that, yes, the return is very clear. So whether you today really feel like the return is very clear to you, or you're really struggling to really poorly define it, or sorry, you're struggling to really define it, I think this next steps and what we'll talk about here from an end-to-end process will really help you come to how to measure this. So as we look at this slide, we're going to unpack it from the standpoint of the enterprise-wide strategy concept that Gopal has really challenged us with. So let's walk through how this can really manifest itself into concrete tactics in order to see this strategy add value into your own organization. And let's see how we can utilize an end-to-end platform concepts to really hone in on measuring your ROI. So I like to break this down, the end-to-end platform automation, really into 4 components. And these 4 components, really starting with the top right box as process discovery, and then at the top left, process governance, bottom left, process automation, and then bottom right, process monitoring. So again, if we break it down into those 4 components, and then really expand on those components, really diving into the details on those, I think we'll see how can we really take this and set ourselves up for success in automation. So if you look at this, really at the center of this universe in a platform approach really should be BPMN. Specifically at the time of this webinar, it's BPMN 2.0. So while most of us here are familiar with BPMN, it's important to reiterate how critical it is to have a standard enterprise-wide semantic to facilitate collaboration across your organizational business units. But this talk is really about how to combine the 3 different components, BPM, RPA, and AI, together in order to make process automation initiatives successful. So in concert with that, we also have strategies in place in order to make our processes observable and measurable. So as well, we have strategies that are really going to help us with discovery processes and understand the real workflow that those processes have with as little subjectivity as possible. Gopal alluded to that in the strategic part of the discussion, the enterprise-wide part. So if we look at the history of how we've typically approached value stream mapping, it's typically achieved via interviews with subject matter experts and observing the actual work. With the acceleration of the digital transformation in most of our organizations, we now see that almost all processes, whether they're structured, semi-structured, unstructured, they really have enough level of digital interaction that we can actually discover the process from the systems standpoint rather than from the human standpoint. This provides us with an opportunity to use process automation and process discovery mechanisms to really uncover hidden opportunities. This is the component of process discovery, really utilizing process mining techniques to discover real process steps in an objective way with as little human bias as possible. So as we utilize our process discovery techniques, what we have found with our own experience via different engagements is that we see process owners that are surprised by the number of variants that actually exist in the real world interactions within their process. So when we, as process owners, describe our processes from our own human experience, we can easily describe the happy path and some of the common exceptions. But what we have trouble with is really seeing how the volume of variation that our teams are actually dealing with. When we are unable to visualize the actual volume of complexity, then we really have trouble achieving that higher level ROI that we're really trying to achieve. But if we're able to process the logs from the systems involved and utilize some of these new techniques, we find ourselves with a powerful discovery entry point for really understanding what our current business processes actually are. So implementing a strategic process discovery component into your end-to-end process automation platform, we have found this to be really powerful. It really provides us a much richer and more meaningful data set to feed into process governance components. So one thing that you want to provide within your process governance process, and really to your process architects, is a way to transition the data assets generated from process discovery into usable BPMN so that you can use that as collaboration steps necessary within the governance process. So if you implement an enterprise-wide strategy around process automation and process governance, that really is embedded within your culture, process governance will be a significant part of this strategy. So you need this culture of collaboration, but as well you need the systems and platforms that can be in place to really provide those checks and balances, balance things out through process approval, et cetera, to really ensure that your processes stay observable, measurable, and that they evolve into the most efficient process for the problem that they're intending to solve. So BPMN is being really the central semantic for this collaboration. Process governance also ultimately should lead to process automation, because if you can discover and you can govern your processes with enough observability, collaboration, and control, we found that automation opportunities, a lot of times they really become self-evident. So now that we're through that, let's unpack really process automation a little more. So the clarity provided by the previous components really highlight how to ensure that you're automating the right process in your organization. What really becomes tricky, again, as Gopal alluded to, is how, when you automate, how the interaction between humans and RPA really work together. So the synchronization between the bots and the human workforce, it really is complex. So you need a platform that enables human interaction to interact with existing legacy systems in a very natural way. So as humans responding to email, placing files in a shared drive, et cetera. But it always has to have the appropriate handoff point to the bots. And really, what you want to try to achieve is a business process that is synchronized, where the humans are really executing the more high-value, logical, complex work, and you're leaving the bots to really execute some of the more lower-value, repetitive work that really doesn't necessarily need somebody if you can really provide the right automation capabilities. And finally, really, process monitoring completes our unpacking of the platform components, because it really gives us insight into how this hybrid workforce is really performing. So without an integrated platform-level observability across your hybrid workforce, it really can become difficult, if not impossible, to fully understand what your ROI is on your automation investments. You need the ability to observe, monitor, and analyze each one of those components that make up your enterprise-wide strategy. Our experience has demonstrated that having a comprehensive, centralized approach is the best way to tackle the end-to-end process automation strategy. When we look at this approach, and really if we look at it from the bottom up on this slide, it'll reiterate the importance of having a center of excellence team that utilizes your already mature Lean or Six Sigma processes. Providing the system platform, really to the organizational platform that you have, will take your automation capabilities to the next level. What you should notice about this model is that the security is really the foundation about your automation strategy. That's really going to be one of the keys that you really have to have in order to make sure that adoption happens appropriately across your organization. But on top of that, you really see this data management capability. And so what we really want to do is have a data management strategy where we can integrate all of these different data types and systems that are really shown on the left into your automation activities. So your data management strategy really needs to have the ability to handle unstructured data, structured data, IO2 streaming data, static data from your data warehouse, data from your process repositories, integration with your systems, your ERP systems, your CMS systems, et cetera. All of that data management components working together with your automation strategy really to become successful. So if we have a good security foundation, a good data management foundation, then as we go up one more, we're really looking at the business process management tool set here in this box in blue. So this next layer of this strategy is really to have a highly integrated tool set as described in this box. This will allow you to really pull together and marry up this data so that it can be utilized for your front-end users. So what you should do is you should really think about this process as the mechanism that really lays the guide rails in which your front-end subject matter experts will be executing their daily work. Utilizing this strategic approach really allows high-value tasks that really require some level of complex logic to be executed by human workforce, leaving the repetitive tasks to your bots. But if you integrate this with some AI capabilities, such as optical character recognition, natural language processing, object recognition, et cetera, you're really going to elevate your ability to assign low-value tasks to bots, because you'll expand the breadth that those bots will really be able to take on, the tasks that they'll be able to take on. Without that, you really have to leave some of those processes, even if they're low value, to a human workforce. And that's really what we want to try to avoid. So if we examine the tool set a bit more, we notice that it's important to utilize these tool set capabilities in concert: process mining, leading to BPMN, leading to IBPMS, leading to RPA, supported by AI, and finally, with an appropriate data management strategy, integrating all of this into your enterprise AI and machine learning strategies. The final layer here is really about the business process mapping and the management and really insights layer. And this is really describing the business enablement that you can achieve when it's supported by an integrated toolset and data management platform, enabling business process mapping and intelligence with user-friendly automation via RPA, and then synchronizing the hybrid workforce with service orchestration and the appropriate decision modeling, or finally, enabling process monitoring component through the process performance analytics capabilities, which really should ultimately integrate into your enterprise BI strategy. So if you look at this model holistically, you can see you've integrated RPA capabilities, really business-friendly RPA compatibilities that are easy to design, easy to deploy. You can open up an opportunity to where you control the process via definitions in your process governance component, but you can federate out bot design and implementation really to citizen developers throughout your organization so that you can scale your automation factory. You can do this without sacrificing quality of your overall business process implementation by centralizing the business process management. So in other words, by combining BPM with RPA, it really allows you to use BPMN to manage the coarse-grained overall business process while utilizing RPA and embedded AI to implement the fine-grained automation activities within the scope of an IBPMS process. When we see this done well, we can see a couple different examples of how this strategy achieves some real business outcomes. So this first story really, this is really a professional service organization that we had an opportunity to partner with and assist them with some automation for their data center upgrade. The main challenge that they had was how to simulate the volume of user activity necessary to prove out that their data center upgrade would sustain the appropriate level of performance and stability for increased number of users that they were expecting. The automation necessary was much more than API calls or UI clicks. It really required some automation that simulated more human-like capabilities, and that was not easy to automate. Utilizing the RPA and monitoring capabilities of the platform, they were able to not only achieve a scale that was unattainable by their human workforce, but it also allowed them to deploy automation in a flexible enough to really change and evolve along with their system and data center. The benefits that they really saw was reduced runtime from their previous strategy from really 10 plus minutes down to about 1 to 5 minutes, depending on the run type that they were using. This really allowed them to free up a considerable amount of man hours to focus on higher value analysis and, of course, achieve their ultimate goal of reducing the risk of latency to their data center. The second story is really where we found a really interesting problem to solve. It required the ability to automate some very human tasks that may not be obvious as an automation opportunity at first. We partnered with a NetSuite solution provider who had a challenge of how to process the release notes that coincide with their biannual NetSuite releases. The solution provider, they have to perform critical analysis against these release notes to really determine how the changes are going to impact their customers. If they don't do this correctly, they can have some significant business impacts. The solution was to really utilize a combination of AI and data management strategy within the platform in order to parse the release notes and marry up the impact analysis with their client portfolios. This allowed automation deployments and reduced execution time down from 40 hours to 40 seconds, dramatically increasing consultant productivity and reducing the risk and really allowing them to gain a competitive advantage. This last use case is really my favorite. It's the one I'm really most proud of. This story is a story of a manufacturing organization. What's really impactful here is the multiple components of the platform that are utilized to achieve the ROI. This was a client that had an understanding that they were that there were some gaps in their invoicing and account payable cycle, but it wasn't clear to them where those gaps really were. So utilizing process discovery, process intelligence, process mining capabilities as the front end of this use case, and utilizing the output of that analysis to govern the current process, and then translating that data into bots, and then combining that with a hybrid workforce where humans were responding to the exception criteria that they saw really drastic improvement. This was not only a cost reduction exercise, this was a use case where they saw increased revenue. They went from having really expanded lead times to being able to recognize revenue faster because the automation allowed them to close the gaps that were causing invoicing errors. So as you look at this slide, not only did they improve the time to revenue by 15 days, they actually increased their quarterly revenue recognition, again, because everything was able to go faster. But they actually found opportunities in uninvoiced billing to the tune of $16 million, as well as finding some cost reduction that really helped elevate their bottom line. So this use case really illustrates how utilizing almost all of the component capabilities, the enterprise-wide strategy, and then those 5 factors to success that Gopal lifted up, how all of this combined with a centralized, integrated platform approach can really pay off. And so with that, I want to thank you for your attention and your participation in this, and we'll move on to the Q&A. So thank you.
Thanks, Andrew, for presenting your case studies there, and as well, Gopal, for joining us today. So we do have time for a Q&A. If you haven't already included your questions in the Q&A box, then feel free to include them in there now. I'm going to kick off with this question here. It's asking, what is the best way to start with an automation project? How do I determine best use cases?
Yeah, what we recommend is, trying to understand what is the business outcome they really are looking for. So we typically ask them to come up with a quadrant that actually, takes the frequency of that particular process execution and the complexity of that process. So once you build that quadrant, you'll actually see there are some low-hanging fruits that are really high frequently, used processes that are low in complexity. Those are the things that you really want to start with. But make sure the business outcome is, because those are the use cases that will give you the best bang for the buck, because you will get the value almost immediately, and that those are the processes that you need to execute more frequently. And then you can do you can avoid the things that you don't execute, or the processes that you don't use too frequently, but also are very complex in nature. So those are the things we try to avoid customers attempting to automate. And then anything in between, like high frequently used but a little complicated, you can definitely attempt to automate those processes, because you have you're going to get more value once you're successful in automating that. And the other one, if it is low complex, and if it is only used in some cases or at a less frequency, that's probably the third priority for you. So I would suggest you to do that exercise before you begin the process of your automation journey, so that you know exactly what you want to tackle and exactly what you want to focus on. That way, it's easy for you to track, measure the ROI, measure the success, and realize the value a lot more faster. But before that, you also want to make sure you pick the right vendor that actually has everything that Andrew just mentioned, right? Make sure you're not just trying to automate a task. You need to focus more on process automation rather than task automation. And that's why it's important to pick the right platform, but do the homework. Make sure you are very clear, or identify a partner that actually can help you drive through the journey. So that's really what I want to say about this.
Amazing, thank you. Okay, we've got a question here from Marcello at BPML. Is it possible to integrate BPM and RPA solutions from different providers, or is it mandatory to use the same platform for both?
So yeah, I think it is possible. I think that you get more value really with an integrated platform. But I think it's also important to really choose an integrated platform that can also satisfy some integration points from from different vendors who provide those sorts of solutions. I think the challenge you really run across is really when you're trying to marry up your data management strategy across that. So I think there are some challenges to doing that. I think what we have really found is an integrated platform is really the best approach to sort of see these things with process intelligence, BPM, and RPA, really along with AI, really kind of married together. Gopal, you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, while it is very much possible to integrate BPM and RPA from different providers, you don't want to focus more of your time on integrating the technologies. You would rather focus your time more on, business outcomes. But if you already invested in any of these platforms and you want to add on top of it, then it makes sense for you to find a platform that actually can be integrated to other pieces of this technology. So,
and I mean, some of the complexity on that. I mean, it's a great question because some of the complexity on this is really, again, if you think about kind of what we really walk through here on this process, if you look at a single BPM process that you're really trying to automate through some BPM solution, a lot of times what we see is that you'll actually have multiple RPA instances wrapped up into the same process. So if it's unintegrated, it really kind of it can become difficult to manage. And it's not so much that that it can't be done, but it's also, you got to think about the challenge of, as the process evolves and as things change over time, what is really the best, most efficient way to manage that with a single integrated platform or really multiple disparate systems? And I think that's where really some of the challenges come in, especially when you're trying to thread multiple bots to a single BPM process.
Amazing. Okay, so we probably have enough time for one more question. I've got a question here from Roy at Baycorp. Should we manage the Center of Excellence in operating models for AI-driven intelligent automation differently than the traditional RPA Center of Excellence?
I think the answer to that is yes. And so if we think about typically what we do when we're managing RPA, each one of those solutions typically are really solving at a very fine-grained level. So again, you're really thinking about some smaller set of actions that you're trying to solve with RPA. You may be stringing them together, but you're stringing them together through just trying some RPA orchestration. If you combine this into more of a holistic business process management, and then I think you really have an opportunity to where you can look at, again, how do you have multiple bots really solving the same business process and really making sure that those are being orchestrated well together? Because again, some of the challenge and really what we see with, historically within BPM is the ability to manage a process that really has more human interaction. RPA, most of the time there's really less human interaction, and we're really it's easier to automate something that can just be fully automated by itself. Combining these two together and then really having a center of excellence around that, where the focus is broader than just RPA. So you're focused on BPM as well as the RPA activities. I think you can find more value in approaching it in that way. And I think that's where we're seeing really the future of RPA and BPM. I think we're going to really see it just kind of meld together to really become one center of excellence.